Good evening, everyone. I'm glad you were all connected here for the second day of RancHER. I'm excited about this program. This is the second day of the second edition, and if you're here yesterday, I think it was a great day. I'm sure today is going to be as great as it was yesterday. I'm really excited about today's talk. We're going to shift gears a little bit. We're going to be really focused today on beef direct marketing. This is would say at least to me a very new subject that I'm really interested in, and I thought it would be great to bring the speakers we have today to share a little bit of information on that topic, right? So if you don't know me, I'm Juliana Ranches. I'm the host of RancHER. I'm assistant professor, beef extension specialist at Oregon State University. I'm based in Burns at the Eastern Oregon Agricultural Research Center. And as part of my job, I do research and extension. So as part of my job, it's a great pleasure to bring you guys RancHER for the second year. So before we move and start, I just want to give you guys a little bit of directions. We have two speakers for tonight, Dr. Jade Cooper and Dr. Julia Livingston. They'll both be presenting beef marketing, direct marketing. And we will do questions at the end of each presentation. We're going to be using the Q&A box, which is on your screen. You can type your questions at any time during those talks, and we'll address those questions at the end of the presentations, okay? At the end of the night, if you guys stay with us till the very, very end, we're going to be doing a prize drawing. So we have a $100 gift card that will go to someone at the end of the night. So you better last at the very last minute, okay? And I guess that's what I had for a little bit of housekeeping notes. So I would like to introduce Dr. Jade Cooper that will be presenting From Farm to Fork and All Things in Between, Direct Marketing of Beef, the Not So Direct Path. I love this title. Dr. Jade Cooper is assistant professor and state meat extension specialist at Texas A&M University. Jade received her bachelor's degree in food science with a meat science option from Oklahoma State University. After receiving her bachelor's degree, she attended the University of Missouri, where she received a master's degree in animal science. Jade accepted the HACCP coordination position with Genius Premium Meats in New Franklin, Missouri, after completing her master's degree. After a brief period in industry, she returned to the University of Missouri to complete her doctorate in animal science and pre-doctoral fellowship at the U.S. Meat Animal Research Center in Clay Center, Nebraska. Dr. Cooper's research and interests focus on understanding improved meat quality and palatability traits, including meat color, tenderness, and flavor. Dr. Cooper has worked on extension programming related to direct beef sales, freezer beef, sustainability, meat quality and palatability, and youth education. Jade, thank you very much for accepting this invitation. I think you have a lot to share with us tonight. I'm really excited, and the screen is yours.
Thanks, Juliana. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Can you see that okay, Juliana?
Yeah, it's perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Perfect. Well, thank you again for the invitation to present tonight. I'm going to start this by saying, I have the flu. So if I sound like I'm dying, it's because I feel like I'm dying. And for anybody that's been in College Station before, it's very likely that you might hear a train behind me at some point. And so I want to apologize for that in advance. But I'm really excited to talk a little bit about direct marketing of beef from kind of a logistical standpoint. As an extension specialist, I will say that this is probably what I get the most calls about from people that are either already producing their own beef and want to get involved, or really are wanting to start from the ground up. And so I think that this is an incredibly relevant topic. And I'm excited that you elected to have it here. And I'm really excited to hear from Julia after me to kind of get some actual real world perspective from someone that's doing it and has been successful doing it. And so to really get started, it's kind of laying out what is direct marketing. And that's really just the direct selling of beef to customers and consumers, and instead of processors, wholesalers, or retailers. And it's really just getting your product from you to them. And that can include doing it at farmers markets, doing online ordering, having your own storefront, going directly to restaurants or local grocers. But it really is kind of this from farm to fork mindset, an avenue to get your product to the consumer. And why do we do that? And I think that the why can really change from person to person. But for one, it eliminates the middleman. And really, one of the cool parts about it as a producer, and something that a lot of people are becoming more and more interested in, is you know what you're putting in, therefore you know what you're getting back, and you can see the product that you're producing. You can talk about the product that you're producing to the people that are buying it from you. And one of the cool and innovative things about this, and the things that allows direct marketing to be so successful, is the fact that it allows for the marketing of products that are not always available to consumers, which is how you can kind of set yourself apart a lot of times. And so you can establish a market or establish a niche that needs supply, and you can market these products and really set yourself apart there, which can really lead to you being successful and really building that kind of customer base that you need. And it gives you the opportunity to build your own brand. And you can do that in a lot of different ways. You know, you can tie it to your beef production outlet. You can kind of establish your own brand for your beef sales specifically, but it allows you to develop that brand and build that based on the product that you're wanting to market. And perhaps the most important aspect of this, and the thing that we're going to come back to time and time again, is the formation of direct relationships with your customers and the consumers of your beef products. And that's so important because it allows for communication and transparency in an industry that has often been plagued by people saying that we don't communicate with them enough and that we're not transparent enough. So it allows for those conversations to happen between consumers and the producers of the product that they're producing. I'm going to come back to this time and time again because it's so important that we establish these relationships with our consumers and with customers, and we can have those conversations and those educational tools that come from selling products this way. And so when we think about goals for direct marketing, obviously goals from person to person, entity to entity are going to be different. But I think kind of encompassing under an umbrella some kind of big level goals that we might see is obviously increasing and improving income. Beef production is not an easy entity to be in general. And so anytime we do something, we want there to be benefit for it, right? And then increasing the demand for beef. We're producing beef. We want people to buy beef and we want people to eat beef. And utilizing direct marketing, that communication, that education that I talked about can help facilitate increasing that demand for beef. Further, we have to meet consumer wants and needs, right? They have to want to buy our product. They have questions, they have demands. We have to meet those. The consumer is becoming a more and more demanding consumer base. They're asking more questions. They want more boxes checked. That's not going to go away. If anything, there's going to be more boxes for us to check. And we can check those boxes for specific groups by doing things like direct marketing. And all of this to kind of say, we can establish positive relationships and views of the beef industry with the consumer. In academia and extension, a lot of times we talk about bridging gaps, right? So bridging gaps between production and consumption of the products that we're producing. Utilizing tools like direct marketing allows us to do that. Again, going back to that communication and that educational aspect that can be incorporated with direct marketing. Again, everybody that's involved in this is going to have different goals and different specific goals. Julia could get on here and talk about the specific goals that they have for their family's direct marketing. But all in all, checking these boxes, meeting these needs are incredibly important and incredibly relevant as a whole to the direct sales of beef in the US. It's kind of funny though, when we call it direct marketing really, because it's really an indirect path. And it might sound very simple to say to someone, yeah, you know, I produce my beef and I sell it to the consumer. But it's not just that. There are so many things that are involved in the direct marketing of your products and that go into, you know, developing a business plan, getting things out there, meeting the needs, handling inventory, figuring out what you're going to sell and how you're going to sell it, And so it's an indirect path, and there are a lot of steps that need to be taken. There's a lot of ways that we have to do this. Everybody's path is going to look a little bit different to getting their product out there, but it's finding your niche, developing your brand, determining limits. You have to find a processor, figure out pricing. All of those things are incredibly important, and they're things that we're going to talk about this evening. And it's also important to remember that nothing is set in stone with this, and you might have to revisit and revise often in order to continue to meet the needs and continue to be as successful as possible in your direct marketing of your product. So when we talk about kind of finding your niche or finding your area, the first thing that you really have to ask yourself is, what's going to set me or what's going to set us apart, right? And so how can I create a product that people are going to want to buy? And why are they going to want to buy that instead of what they're already buying? And then you really have to think about, what can I do with my current herd? And are there things that I'm willing to change to be able to do things that might set me apart, or to be able to reach a different consumer group? Again, this is going to vary from person to person, but it's important to identify that avenue that you want to go down and then really chase that. You have to determine your product goals. What do you want to produce? How do you want to produce it? How do you want to get it out there? Things of that nature. And all of that really kind of comes back to understanding your targeted consumer. Like I said, we're going to revisit this time and time again, because there's no point in producing it if you don't have people that are going to buy it, right? And so you have to really ask yourself, what products do these consumers want? And how can I market my products to meet their needs? And again, that answer is not going to be the same for everybody. It's going to change based on who you're targeting, where you're located, what you're trying to produce, what you can produce. And so you really have to identify that targeted consumer group and ensure that they're there before you can start making a lot of these decisions. And a big thing that comes into that is, how do we effectively communicate with the consumer? You know, if you're targeting kind of your local hometown group that you're going to have a storefront, they're going to come to you. How do you communicate with them? If you're going to do a bunch of online sales, how do you market in that way? So it's really understanding your targeted consumer. How do you get information to them? How do you do the advertising and the communication and education that you need to get that information to them? And then doing that as successfully and effectively as possible. It's also important to remember that this is going to get easier as you develop and establish relationships. And so initially, it's going to be an uphill battle at times. But if we know one thing about consumers, and we know one thing about social media and just people in general, is that they talk, right? And so if people have positive experiences with you, positive experiences with your product, and even if they might have a not so positive experience with your product, but that turns around into a positive experience with you and handling that, they're going to talk about those positive experiences. And that word of mouth is going to play an incredible role in building your consumer base as well. You have to develop your brand, and you want to stand out among the crowd, right? And again, that's going to appeal, you know, it goes back to really appealing to that target audience. You need to be memorable, and you need to be able to convince the consumer group, why is my product, or why is the product that I'm producing better than what they're consuming now? And, you know, that can go back to, are we checking boxes of they want locally sourced items? You know, do they want to know how it was raised? Do they want to know how it was managed? Are you willing to be transparent about those things? But being able to answer the questions and meet the demands that they're asking is going to be able to show them why the product that you're producing is better than maybe what they're buying at their large scale grocery store right now, right? Honesty is important. Like I said earlier, we as an industry have oftentimes been kind of plagued with being this group that is dishonest, or we're not transparent. COVID really put some issues and trust in the supply chain. So feeling that you can be honest about what you're doing and what you're producing is key to kind of developing that brand and building that consumer group that's going to back your brand. And the cool thing about your brand is it doesn't have to be directly associated with your current operation. You can keep those separate, or you can put those together. But your brand is important because that's going to be the thing that they really remember and that they can identify moving forward. We know that people are willing to pay more for attributes that they want, shared beliefs, and guaranteed claims. This probably isn't surprising to anybody, but they're going to look for key terms like these, or they're going to ask questions about what does this mean? What is a prime and a choice quality grade? And being able to answer that is important. And we're going to talk a little bit about what some of these mean a little bit later on. Determining your limits is big, and it's sometimes a hard thing to do, but it's so incredibly important. You have to determine, what can my startup cost me? What do I have? What do I have for maintenance? What are my expendable resources? What processors are available? And how does that limit what I can and can't do? What supply do I have? What demand do I have? Can I meet that? And what are my input versus output costs? You have to know those limits, and you have to be able to kind of fit into the constraints of those limits, because it can easily get out of hand, right? And you can easily make promises that maybe you can't keep, or you can have this idea in your head of, oh, I'm going to be able to open this online store and ship things across state lines. And then you get into your processor, they aren't federally expected. You can't do that. And so you really have to understand what your limits are and what you can produce. But it's also important to remember that your limits can change. And so again, coming back, being flexible, revisiting and revising your plan sometimes, that's going to play a key role as you develop this business model and move forward with it, with what you have available to you at the time. Selecting a processor is one of the most important things that you can think about and do when it comes down to direct marketing your product and getting product out there. Really, we're relying on these small to medium-sized processors to do this type of work and produce this type of product. And a strong relationship with your processor is really crucial when it comes to direct marketing your product. You have to know that you can depend on them. You have to know that they're going to get you the product that you're asking for. You have to know that you're going to be able to get in and that dates are going to be available. So selecting a processor is huge in that regard, but it's also incredibly important to think about when you're making decisions on who and what you're marketing to. So should I use a federally inspected processor? Should I go state inspected? Is state inspected even available in the state that I live in? Or would custom exempt be something that you could utilize depending on how you're wanting to sell your product? And we'll talk through some of these right now. So for federally inspected, that is going to be the USDA FSIS that's going to be inspecting the live animals and the carcasses. It has to meet all of the federal facility requirements. You're going to get a federal inspection stamp like you can see at the bottom of the slide there. And the important thing to note here is that federally inspected product can be sold and shipped both within and outside of state lines. So if you're somebody that says, hey, I really want to open this online store, I want to be able to ship everywhere, I want anybody to be able to buy from me, federal inspection is going to be something that's probably pretty necessary for you in order to be able to do that. On the flip side, some states, not all of them, have a state inspection service, which is going to be inspection that's done by state employees instead of federal employees. The requirements for state inspection have to at least be equal to federal standards. So really the difference is who's paying the person that's putting on the frock that day, and so they have to meet at least federal requirements, but it's a state employee doing it. Remember, not all states have a state system. So depending where you are, you can look up to see if your state has a state inspection service. The important thing to know here is that products can only be sold within state lines. And so that can limit the availability of who you can ship to. There are a few programs that kind of do interstate commerce and things like that. There are a few states that are involved in that. And that's going to be something that you have to look at for your specific state and the states around there to determine whether that's available or not. But really, when you're thinking about state inspected facilities, thinking about those products can really only be sold within state lines. So that can be one of those if you're kind of, opening a retail front in your hometown and things like that, a state inspection system would probably be good for you. We also have something called custom exempts, which facilities and products are not inspected daily. However, the product can't be sold to anyone except the animal owner. And Jade, what does that mean? Well, it requires a direct sale of a live animal to the customer. And so that's going to be you're buying an animal from me and it's going to get harvested. You can sell parts of that animal to people. So 4 people could go in on the same animal and buy that. But the animal is what's being sold, not the meat product itself. it's important to know here that that product is going to be labeled not for sale, and that product can't be sold, it can't be donated, and it has really some limited uses allowed. So that can be the owner that's raising the livestock, the person that bought it, members of that house, non-paying household guests or household employees. So you're really limited on how that can be utilized and sold. But for some people, selling of the live animal is what works. If you're going to do a lot of custom exempt stuff, having like a custom processing agreement is a good thing to kind of have in place. I took this slide from Tiffany Lashmet, who is our ag lawyer in extension. And, she really talks about the fact that having this custom processing agreement can save you a lot of headache moving forward. And so including things like letting that information be known about how the meat can and can't be used, how the payment is calculated, the payment terms of when, how, why, anything like that. Who's filling out the cut sheet? How's that being done? How's the processor getting paid? What happens upon delivery and things of that nature. Having all of that encompassed in an agreement early on can save you a lot of headache moving down. So that's another thing to kind of think about if the custom exempt route is the route that you're thinking about going. Another thing that we have to think about pretty regularly is establishing a price, right? And it's important to know that because, again, we talked early on about how, one of the big goals of direct marketing is increasing income. Like I said, we all want to make money. If we're going to put input into something, we want to be able to show for that. And so really what you put in needs to come out plus, right? And when establishing your price, again, going back to honesty being key is going to be really important. You can be honest with your customer here too, right? This is one of those times that we can actually educate the consumer and the customer on what all goes into producing the product that's going to end up on their plate or producing the product that's in their basket. So talk to them about production, processing, and marketing costs. Talking to them about, these are all the things that I have to do to raise this beef animal that you're buying from me right now. Talking to them about management, labor, all of those things. That's an educational opportunity as a beef producer to educate the general public and, again, bridge those gaps. And I think that's incredibly important, that when we can lay out, this is all what's going into this, and this is why my price is set at what it is. And having that kind of fluid conversation is so important, and people are very receptive to that. Also remember that if your product is different from what's available, your price can be too. That's part of it, right? People are willing to pay for what we want. We talked about that earlier. They're paying for us to check those boxes. If it's important to them, they're going to want to pay for it. And simple is sometimes better. So just laying it out there, having these simple prices is really going to pay off in the end. If you need to locate a slaughter facility, USDA and the National Ag Law Center has kind of compiled all of the federally inspected facilities in the US and laws and contact information for officials in every state. That can be a good resource for really anybody looking to get into this. I also know Oregon State has the niche processing group there. That is a wonderful organization that has a lot of information available there too. So Juliana's, I think, is going to send these links out, but here's just kind of an all-in-one availability for looking at processing facilities that are available to you guys, no matter where you are. And this stuff is easy to find online as well. If you have some questions or have more questions about anything like that, this information is readily available. Going back to building relationships, like I said, I can't really talk about this enough, but when you think about it kind of at the foundational and ground level, it's important to remember that face-to-face marketing options really don't happen at the commodity level, right? You're not going to walk into like an HEB or a Walmart or a Kroger really and have these opportunities to really have the marketing and the communication outlets that you could have with walking in or working with someone that's direct selling their beef. People want that. People receive that well. And it also is something that you as a producer or someone that's involved in direct marketing need to take advantage of. It allows for the customer to know the producer. Like I said, they have questions, we can answer them. If you produced it, utilize that to your advantage. And like I said before, consumers and customers talk. They can be your biggest salespeople. I always use the example of, it's a Friday night football game. Somebody sees you there, they're going to lean over to the person next to them and be like, you know what? I bought this steak from Juliana last week. It was incredible. I can't wait to go back. And they're going to continue doing that and spreading that good word. Most of us know the power of Facebook and the power of a mom on Facebook and getting her opinion out there and saying those things. Again, positive experiences, word is going to travel fast, as are negative experiences, right? So that's when it comes back to being able to take ownership and accountability and have those conversations when maybe something doesn't go as right, and kind of keeping that bridge gap, keeping things peaceful and having those conversations. Accountability and ownership is huge for the consumer as well. Consumers are demanding, they want boxes checked, and they don't want to take responsibility for things. So sometimes we kind of have to do that on our own, right? But having those positive experiences it's going to keep them coming back. We have to communicate and deliver. The biggest thing is, you have to believe in your product and you have to share those beliefs. People need to see you believing in what you're producing. If you're passionate about it, you're advertising, you're getting it out there, people are going to see that passion. They're going to become interested and they're going to want to buy it. Again, kind of having that personal tie into it allows you to really take hold of some of those things and push forward with that. Communicate with other producers and processors on how to better your product and your marketing plans. Look at what other people are doing and doing well and figure out how to emulate that to benefit you. It all comes down to listening to what consumers want, listening to their needs, listening to their ideas. And sometimes we have to be open and accepting of change and realizing, if I would start doing this, I could maybe make this many more sales, or here's a niche that is really untapped. Here's how I can get into it. Some of those are going to make sense for you. Some of them aren't. We can't do everything, right? It's important to remember that we can't do everything, but there may be opportunities where you can kind of pivot into that and really kind of tap into something that no one else is tapping into, whether it be at all or in your area, which is really important. So communicating, figuring out what's available, what you can do, and then delivering on that is so important. You also have to want to know your consumer. Like I said, these direct marketing, selling of these products, it involves direct relationships with your customers. You need to be prepared to ask questions and you need to be more prepared to answer questions. Consumers ask a lot of questions. Some of them are going to make a ton of sense. Some of them are not. But you have to be able to answer those questions, have those conversations. And again, it's going to benefit both of you because we're educating about the beef industry and you're educating and promoting your product and your business at the same time. So you really have to have that desire to make those connections with your consumer and your customer base, because it all really is built on this foundational trust. And that is what is going to be the key to build to your brand loyalty. It's going to keep people wanting to come to buy from you. It's going to keep people, signing up for those newsletters, tapping into that, coming by your store, ordering from you online, is knowing that there's transparency, there's trust, and they feel like they actually have a relationship with you, who is the producer of their product. And knowing what you'll market is incredibly important. It can play a key role in decision making. Are you going to want to market things like quarters, sides, or whole beef? Are you going to keep it at that point? Are you going to do stuff like offering individual cuts? Are you going to offer bundles? And remember that specialized cuts do require more specialized and experienced meat cutters. And so again, making those decisions and determining what you're going to be selling is really critical when finding and establishing a processor. Can that processor give you the product that you're wanting to sell? Bundles are a really, really good thing, and they're useful in getting rid of the odds and ends. They're getting rid of a lot of the things that we get a lot of. Unfortunately, our middle meats don't make up a whole lot of the carcass, right? And so we have a lot of things like ground beef, roast. Offering those bundles are avenues to get rid of a lot of that at a good price. And it's important to also think about right now family size. And so we're seeing kind of a shift in family size in the US right now. People aren't having as many children. I'm a 28-year-old single woman that has no kids. I could not make it through even a quarter of beef in a year, right? But some of these smaller bundles are something that I can buy. They'll fit in my regular size freezer. It works for me, and it's financially, it makes a lot of sense for me to do things like that. So thinking about opportunities like those to cater to more groups and getting more of that product out there for people that want to buy it is something to really consider and think about too. Remember, high-end cuts are easier to sell than low-end cuts. Like I said, those middle meats, you know, people know they like ribeyes. They know they want to eat ribeyes. You're not going to have trouble selling those. You're going to have a lot of roasts. You're going to have a lot of ground beef, right? So thinking about making sure that you have the right tools to get rid of excess and marketing those things is incredibly important. Portion size is important. You know, are you going to cut those roasts into smaller portions, things of that nature? Having a variety available is cool. But one of the biggest things that I've seen, and one of the things that I talk about quite a bit, is utilizing opportunities to educate the consumer on more like lesser known cuts. So providing handouts, recipe suggestions, newsletters, things like that. Those can be educational tools to get product out for you, but also it's marketing. It's making those connections. It's doing those things. So you're marketing these products that maybe you're not having a lot of success getting out, or you have just kind of an excess of at the time, but it's also going out in your newsletter. You're getting your brand in front of them. You're providing them with the tools that they need to have a successful eating experience with that. So if you shoot a recipe out with your newsletter and say, hey, you know, I'm running a special on this specific roast. Here's how you cook it. Here's what you do with it. This is exactly step-by-step what you need. People are going to take that, come in and buy it because they feel that they're capable of doing it, and you're going to be marketing that stuff as you need. You have the opportunity to be creative, use it to your advantage. And I think that that's so important and so necessary in this market. Thinking about how you'll sell, again, going back to, do we want to sell the percentage of this live animal? Again, allows for the use of a custom slaughter facility. You don't need all the permitting. Cons, not everybody can afford or wants that much beef. Facility quality can sometimes be an issue, and you don't want that to kind of reflect poorly on you. You can sell a percentage of a processed beef. That might be less hassle. Again, size is a big thing there. Inspection, permits, things of that nature, and then selling individual cuts. It allows you to have a larger customer base, but there's just a lot more steps involved, a lot more work with storage and inventory. So really making decisions on what and how you're going to sell things is a key component in getting involved in direct marketing and being successful in that. Labeling is important too. It can be a simple or a tedious process depending on what you're wanting to market, put on your label, and how you're wanting to market your product. Again, state lines requires a federal label in most cases. And any of the claims that are made on a federal label, it has to be approved at the federal level, because you can't make claims that can't be proven. We don't want to lie. And so it can be something that the FSIS will have to approve any of those specialty claims that we might have. You're going to have to provide documentation on those. You have to submit that label for approval. Plants will normally help you submit that, and there is a turnaround time on that. So you really have to kind of keep that in mind when doing these things. And so it's important to think about that and know that when coming up with your label, do I want to have all of these, specialty claims? Do I want it to be pretty generic? Normally generic ones are going to get approved a lot faster. And so figuring out what's going to work for you, for the product that you're producing, and making sure that you can prove all of those things, get that done in a timely fashion, and things of that nature. Labeling is important. It's required. So making sure that you're doing that accurately and effectively is really important. Sales and distribution is important as well. So how are we going to sell that product, and how are we going to get it out there? And again, that's going to be something that's going to vary based from person to person and entity to entity. Are you going to do in-person and phone sales? Are you going to have like an online ordering system? Are you going to have catalogs? Are you going to have pickup or delivery options, or like a storefront? All of that will play a key role in how you're going to package your products, how you're going to get it in there, how you're going to store it, things of that nature. And that's really going to impact your prices, your profits, and what you need to be successful. Again, that's going to change from entity to entity and what's going to meet your needs the best. So remember, we talked about what you'll market and having all of these things. We're talking about high-end cuts, portion size, using these opportunities to educate the consumer on more lesser known cuts or why we do things that we do. I wanted to revisit this slide to kind of move into the next section of my talk. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time here talking about some things that can impact meat quality so that you can have these conversations with your customer about why we do some of the things that we do. And it's important to remember that from start to finish, it all plays a role. So decisions that are made in the live animal are going to impact our carcasses, they're going to impact our quality, and they're going to impact what we have and what we can get out to the customer, right? So being able to educate them on why we do things is incredibly important. And again, it really does promote that transparency. So we're going to be going from, a beef animal to a beef carcass. But it really doesn't stop there, right? Because then we're going from this carcass to these cuts. And there's a lot that's involved in that. And they're all very different. And when you have somebody that buys a 1,200 pound animal from you and they take it in and they get about 500 pounds of beef back and they call you and they're like, where the heck is all of my meat? Explaining to them, that it's not all turning into, a trimmed or, a boneless cut is important because we have to have the right expectations. And it's important for you as a producer to know, I'm taking this many animals in, this is what I'm going to expect to get back and the type of inventory that I'm going to have, right? So it's important to kind of have realistic expectations, again, about those inputs and how those turn into outputs. And seeing that there are a lot of factors that can impact what we end up with from each animal. And I think what's really important to think about from a direct marketing standpoint is what kind of cuts can I get? And that's really going to be up to you and up to the processor that you're utilizing. So you're going to have these animals, you'll take them to a processor. They may have sheets that look something like this. Some of them, the customer's going to fill in. Some of them you're going to fill in and figure out what you're wanting. Some of them are going to offer things like this Meat Fanatic here in the middle where they have things picked out for you. But looking at these cut sheets and determining what can I get from the processor that I'm utilizing will allow you to decide what can I sell or what can my customer get from me at this processor and what's going to be available. So it's important to understand and have an idea of what to expect moving forward with that. It's incredibly important to remember that not all cuts are the same. Muscle location and function play a substantial role in meat quality and palatability attributes. So if it's a more locomotive muscle, like in the chuck or the round they're using to walk around with a lot, those are going to be the things that we see a lot of roasts in, right? We got to cook those low and slow, add that moisture in, so that we can break down some of that connective tissue because they're not very tender. Whereas some of our supportive muscles, like our tenderloin and things like that, high heat, we can get those in and out. And so it's going to impact those palatability attributes. It's going to impact the cooking method, and it's going to impact the value. So understanding that and being able to explain that to a customer is incredibly important when talking about those educational opportunities. And also from a marketing standpoint, for providing information on, hey, I have a bunch of top round roasts available. I'm going to run a special on it. Here's a recipe for it. Here's how to cook it and why. And I think that that's incredibly important, like I said, and incredibly useful and easy for you to do as a producer and someone that's marketing these products to get that information out there to promote your brand and a positive eating experience. So like I said, looking at those most valuable cuts here, what I really want you to take away is those middle meats that we talked about, like things like the rib and the loin. They don't make up a huge percentage of the animal in the hot carcass, right? So we have a lot of those more locomotive, less valuable cuts that we're having to utilize and sell, and having a game plan for how to do that is incredibly important moving forward. So looking at some other of these factors, when we think about meat quality and understanding them, physiological age of an animal is really important. And so when we talk about the physiological age of an animal, I always say that getting old sucks. I always say 27 hit me like a ton of bricks, and I haven't peaked since. And it happens with the animal too. So animal age is going to impact our flavor. It's going to impact our color. It's going to impact our tenderness. I think you can see here in the picture on the screen, that doesn't look like that sea of cherry red when we think about beef, does it? And so knowing the type of animal that we're selling and what we're getting, we have to think about that from a standpoint of how it's going to impact palatability, but also carcass maturity and physiological age of an animal plays a role in quality grading if that's something that we're going to decide to do, that you're going to elect to do with your product, and understanding how that plays a role. And so as cattle advance in age, we have these thoracic buttons on the carcass, and they're going to ossify, which is basically just going to fuse from cartilage into bone. And so you may hear the term hard bone, and that's going to be some of our older carcasses. And again, that's going to play a substantial role when we talk about quality grading here in a minute, because looking at that carcass maturity is going to play a key role in establishing those quality grades. And we know that people buy based on higher quality grades, right? They expect higher quality and a higher eating experience from a higher quality grade. Additionally, connective tissue is impacted as an animal gets older. And so as an animal gets old, connective tissue gets thicker. It doesn't break down with cooking. We can kind of think of it like a picket fence, and the older an animal gets, the more pickets there are in the fence. And basically we can't break that down. And so what happens with that? Our teeth have to do it, right? So if we have more connective tissue, that's going to be less tender. And so that's something that we have to consider as well when thinking about the products that we're selling and explaining, well, this muscle might have more connective tissue in it because it's locomotive. So that's why we have to cook it the way that we do, because we have to break that down. So looking at carcass quality impacts and quality grade, when we think about quality grade, there are really two primary factors that are evaluated when determining a quality grade. That's going to be our carcass maturity that we just talked about, and then our marbling amount. And so based on the carcass maturity and the amount of marbling that's present, we basically have a quality grade that is estimating a taste appeal or a palatability or an eating experience of that product. So the higher the quality grade is, we basically just assume that we're going to have a more pleasant eating experience. And as we move through the differences in quality grade, we can see that there's a pretty substantial difference in marbling amount going from select to prime, which isn't going to shock anyone that's involved in beef production. But you can even see kind of the wide range in marbling and choice, right? And so knowing what to expect and being able to explain to a customer that quality grade is indicative of eating experience will allow you to educate them on why prime beef costs more than select, or why this choice steak is going to cost more than select, because we can assume that you are going to have a more pleasurable eating experience based off of that. And I love this graph because I think it does a really good job in explaining that as quality grade moves up, we're going to have more and more desirable and likelihood of having desirable eating experiences. And as we decrease in quality grade, we can see that the likelihood that we have an undesirable eating experiences increases pretty dramatically, right? And so it's important to kind of think as marbling or these quality grades is almost like insurance, right? And so the more of that we have present, the more likely we are to have that pleasant eating experience. And again, that's kind of like a cycle, right? A good eating experience is going to keep people coming back and buying your product. And it's going to keep that demand for beef high, like we talked about. There are economic incentives for beef quality, right? We're at over 80% choice in prime in the US right now. That's what consumers expect. They expect good quality and they expect that consistently. And in the US, we do a good job of doing that, which has also allowed us to develop and have success in some of those premium programs that include quality grade and things like that in their requirements. We can also talk about finishing, like grass versus grain finished beef. We know that the time for harvest for grain finished animals is a lot shorter, right? We get them done quicker. Grass finished animals require more resources. There is a market for grass finished beef. I definitely am not going to say that there's not, but it's also knowing what your inputs are going to be to have that output, and also what to expect from those outputs. And so when we talk about these high energy diets or in grain finished products, they can impact kind of our live weight and our growth depending on our plane of nutrition. And it's important to remember that marbling is the last fat depot that gets what it needs. And so that's why we're pushing these high energy diets at the end. And so really just kind of knowing what to expect if you're marketing something like a grass finished product, there are clear differences in the carcasses, right? There are going to be clear differences that are available and seen from a visual standpoint, from a size standpoint, and things of that nature. There's a market for everything, right? But just having a good idea of what you're producing, how you're producing, what you're going to get out of it is incredibly important. Postmortem aging is also something that I think a lot of people are aware that we do, but they don't really know what it means or what it does. And so I think it's important to talk about that kind of briefly. And so a little bit ago, I said that getting old sucks, and it does, but it's important to know that while getting old sucks, aging doesn't in the case of meat and meat quality. And so when we age meat, we actually have this enzyme system that's just naturally present in the muscle. And while it's being aged, these enzymes that are known as the calpain system, they actually just act to break down structural proteins. And so you can kind of think of these structural proteins as being kind of these pickets in the fence, almost like we talked about with connective tissues. You know, we have this overlap, and these calpains are just in there breaking those down. And so you can kind of think of those as termites, but with calpains, we have the termites. And so we have to have something that's going to kind of inhibit that. So we also have this naturally present regulator of calpains, which is called calpistatin. But basically we have this proteolysis that's occurring, which is just breaking down these meat proteins. And anything that's getting broken down like that naturally means that that's less work that we have to do with our mouths, right? And so we're basically just allowing the muscle to tenderize itself based on letting it store there and letting that calpain system work. And you can kind of see here the differences over time and kind of the separation of that muscle during aging. And you can see where some of these cross sections or cross bridges have just kind of broken. And you can see that that will be less work for our mouths to do. So aging is incredibly important when we think about tenderness. And we know that tenderness is so important when it comes to having a positive eating experience. And we know that consumers are willing to pay for a guaranteed tender product. I always ask students in my classes, I'm like, how many of you have had a tough steak before? Everybody raises their hand. I always say, okay, if you go to your favorite restaurant 10 times and 9 times, it was incredibly good and exactly what you expected. And then one time you had a really tough steak. When somebody mentions your favorite restaurant, what's the first thing that you're going to think of? And everybody says, oh, that time it was tough. So it's important to remember that like the bad things stick out sometimes, right? And so us as an industry utilizing aging to promote tenderness allows us to kind of negate some of that and reduce the risk of having that tough steak happen. And so it's just incredibly important that we do that. There are a lot of different methods to do that with that we could talk about, but aging is so important. And we can see this graph is basically just showing how tenderness levels or the amount of force that we need to get through a bite decreases over time with aging. And it's pretty substantial, you know, in the first 14 days or so, you can see that. Also knowing that there is a genetic component to that. Some animals are a little bit more predisposed to being more tough. So some of those indicus influenced animals tend to have more calpistatin present. And so they are a little bit more tougher. So knowing that, knowing what you're producing and being able to maybe genetically select to kind of counteract that sometimes is really important. But, you know, aging, tenderness, incredibly important, and something that, like I said, I think a lot of people know that we age meat, but understanding why and knowing why we do it is a little bit of a gray area. And again, a very easy conversation to have and kind of a cool conversation to have when we talk about the fact that those things are naturally occurring, right? So again, it's important to remember that it all plays a role. So there are numerous factors that impact beef quality and palatability. Again, quality and palatability, having good eating experiences is going to be what brings people back. Those negative eating experiences are likely to outweigh the positive ones. So being able to do things and explain why we do things to have positive eating experiences is important. And that there are a number of factors in both the live animal and postmortem that happen that impact palatability. And it's important for personal consumption, right? We're consumers too. So we want to have good eating experiences, and we want to be able to market our products and know that the consumer is going to have a good eating experience as well. You have to know your product to sell your product. I think that that's really important to have those conversations and be able to do that. Again, going back to kind of our key steps at the beginning as I wrap up here, there's all these things that you have to do to get direct marketing going and to be able to do it. And like I said, you have to have that flexibility and being able to revisit and revise. Like I said, direct marketing plans are built upon. Starting small is not necessarily a bad thing. You can expand your options when you can and draw back when you need to. Your limits can change. Your marketing and your sales plans can change too. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it has to make sense. It has to make sense for you. It has to make sense for your business. It has to make sense for your herd. So at the end of the day, it has to make sense, and it has to be something logical that you're doing and putting a lot of time and resources into. There are challenges. Like I said, it's a lengthy process to establish. It takes time to establish a process that results in a large profit. It takes a lot of attention, and you have to be prepared to be involved. And you don't want to do one of those things where you're, devoting so much time to the direct marketing of your product that you're not doing what you were normally doing in your beef production. You take a hit here, and then those costs kind of negate out. So it really takes a lot of attention and involvement with doing that in a balanced way to make sure that you're not suffering a loss somewhere else that's really, if you're breaking even because of the profits that you're making here. And like I said, the costs associated with direct marketing, they do expand far beyond the beef production and processing costs, right? And so thinking about the medium to small processor schedule, establishing that processing cycle, you can't deny that it's your product. So if your claims aren't met, that's you. You have to be able to afford errors, and you have to think about things like shipping and storage. Those are huge inputs that are necessary for outputs. So being able to plan for those effectively is important. But as we move forward, like I said, there is an increased demand for direct marketed products. I get calls about it all the time. We do a lot of programs on this. It's becoming really relevant, and I don't see that going away. There are opportunities for grants and funding for establishment of these markets and the marketing options. We're seeing a surge in small to medium processing facilities that people are opening or want to open. So there's going to be more availability to get in some of those. And like I said, at the end of the day, consumers are showing increased interest in locally sourced products, which means that there are going to be more and more of those markets that are being made available. As I wrap up, I just want to kind of promote one of the resources that we have through Texas A&M AgriLife Extension. My colleagues over there with me, Justin Benavidez and Tiffany Lashmitt, put together this really incredible handbook for really looking at the legal and economic considerations for direct beef sales. They've done a fantastic job with this resource. It's online for free, or you can buy a physical copy from them online, but that's there. And it kind of puts all of the fun stuff, all of the not so fun stuff from the legal and economic side. And then I contributed to some of the beef stuff specifically in there. That's all together in one handbook. So that's available to anybody that would like to look at that. And we are offering some direct marketing programs through A&M AgriLife Extension as well that are available. So they have really done a great job of helping get this word out there. And a lot of the information from the legal and economic side came from them in this talk. And so with that, I would like to thank you all for sticking through that with me, and I would happily take any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Cooper. That was awesome. Enjoyed. I'm still laughing at your slide where you said like getting old sucks, but aging does not. I agree. Age stakes are the best.
Right.
Now I really appreciate it. I think I'm a big fan of direct marketing. I think this is not a trend. I think this is something that came to stay. A lot of consumers are much more interested in where the food comes from. So I think we're gonna see an increase on that in the next few years. If capacity permits, right? That's, of course, there's limitation. But I really like how you touch on the points that direct marketing is not so simple, and there's a lot of relationship building. I've honestly never thought about this, which is kind of obvious, but in my mind, I always think about the practical points of stuff. So I really like that you share that. And I think it is an amazing opportunity for us to fight for our industry to, like you mentioned, education and getting consumers more aware of where food comes from and how it's being handled, managed, and stuff. So I think it is great opportunity. So thank you very much for bringing that information to us. So we do have quite a bit of questions in the Q&A box. So if you want to go ahead and read those and then answer to those, that will be Awesome.
Yeah, sure. So the first two questions are pretty similar. So it's, are there any kind of like loans or grants that are available to producers that are interested in starting a business, whether that be for marketing, or some of the big ones that are available right now are for establishment or improvements in processing facilities. So there are some of those available in like the Build Back Better plan and things like that. Those are available at the federal level. You could really just type in like processing facility or direct marketing grants, and those are available. There's a large pot of money that's been made available to that. And I will say, on the flip side of that, I've been in this job for about a year, and the amount of calls that I get about people that are wanting to chase this money, there's a lot of people trying to get into the pools for chasing this money. Some of them are like, you know what, I've had cattle forever. I want to do this. It makes sense for me. I've looked at, resources and areas and things like that. And I'm like, hey, this makes sense. And then I get the calls on the flip side that are like, hey, I touched a cow one time on my kindergarten field trip. I think I'm going to do this. And so kind of being aware that even if some of these resources aren't made available to you right now, there are going to be more resources available, especially thinking about it from like a facility standpoint. I always tell people, wait a few years, and some of the ones that get built right now are going to be vacant, and then you can buy those facilities. But there are some right now available that, like I said, are easy to find and utilize, but just really think about from a lot of different perspectives on what makes sense for you specifically, but those are available. And I think we're going to see more of those become available as well. Someone else said, how much should EPD and genetics play a role when selecting animals to process? Genetics are huge, and there's a lot of different things that we can talk about when it comes to, live animal function and being able to kind of live effectively where you are. So the genetics that we're selecting for down here in Texas, and the genetics that Juliana is selecting for in Oregon are probably going to look very different, right? But it's also kind of like I talked about in the tenderness standpoint of, okay, if we're having to select for heat tolerance and we maybe are taking a knock at tenderness, selecting, to crossbreed with something that is going to marble a little bit better, that can kind of negate those things. I think that's really important. And so there could be a lot that goes into that, depending on what you're trying to produce, where you're at, the type of product that you're wanting to get out there, the type of animal that you're wanting to raise. So genetics are really important. And I think we're going to see more and more of those EPDs that are available based on more carcass attributes and things of that nature. Being able to select for marbling is a cool thing. Being able to select for tenderness is a cool thing. I'm a color chemist, so thinking about being able to do all of that in the future is important. And we're constantly striving to get those EPDs going on things like that. But yeah, genetics play a huge role in those things. And then, are there resources for how to label your products? Yes, there are resources online that are readily available to find on labeling. There in the handbook that I posted, they have a lot of good resources based on labeling there. And also going to the plant that you're thinking about using, they will help you directly with your label as well. A lot of times they will help you with, coming up with your label, submitting your label, things like that. So if you identify a processor in a plant, a lot of times they can work with you on your label as well.
Thanks, Jade. I do have one more question kind of aligned to that, since we're talking about processing facilities. What are some of the advices or best ways to go about choosing that processing facility? If you want to highlight some main points, like what you should look at, like, is this a good place to go? Of course, if you're in Oregon, there's a limited number of places, but something that we should keep in mind, I guess.
Yeah, Juliana, that's good. And I think that depending on where you are, location is going to be a big thing. You're going to have some people that have a wide variety of selection of where they might want to go. And you're going to have some people that are like, this is where I have to go, right? This is it for me. But if you do have the opportunity to maybe select from a few, go tour them, get in there, see if they'll let you in to look at them, talk to the owners, talk to the people that are working there, figure out what they can and can't do, figure out, if you're in a place that's that has state inspection and you're trying to figure out, do I need federal, do I need state, are they inspected in general, those types of things, go there and ask those questions, get to know those people, because your processor can make or break you, right? And figure out, can you give me the products that I'm wanting? Have some phone calls, get there, do that. Like I said, if you're limited, you're limited. And that's, that's unfortunate. Hopefully with some of these new processors coming up, we'll see some of those limitations start to kind of diffuse a little bit. But the more information, the more interaction that you can get with the processor early on, the better off you're going to be.
Great. And one more. So if someone's wanted to start, what are the most important points this person have to keep in mind? You would say, like, I don't know, like what would you be suggesting?
Yeah, I think from an input side, being aware of what input costs are going to be, and also knowing your limitations. Like I said, shipping and storage are huge. So figuring out, how am I going to do that? What kind of packaging do I need? How do I store the product if I'm going to do it that way? Having a plan for that is really important. But again, figuring out who your customers are going to be and connecting with them is so important, because you can have all of this stuff and you can have stuff in the freezers, but if it's not getting sold, at the end of the day. So I think, having a realistic mindset about what you have and getting that going and making sure that that's set in stone very well. And then also really, really knowing your customer base and having them defined and kind of solidified, or at least having a foundational customer base is important. And it looks like we just got one more question in the chat. So what are good ways to advertise? Facebook likes to remove our posts about beef. Yeah, that's fun, right? So I will never knock social media. When we do the Where's the Beef panels, we have some producers, just like Julia's about to do after me, talk about some ways that they advertise. All of them mention social media, whether it be Facebook and figuring out how to get around that. Instagram is a big one. Twitter's going to be a big one too. But I think things like email newsletters are huge. And again, I think that's where it can come in, of doing things like, here's my special on this specific cut. Here's a recipe on how to do it. Here's where it's available. Running those holiday ads for prime rib at Easter, right? And getting that out there, cultivating it to where it's like, hey, you want to make this for your family? I understand that. I want to support you and your family, making those connections like that. But if you're local and doing things like just getting it out there, sponsoring Little League games, doing out and buying those things like that, the things that matter to the people in your community are important too. Buying those banners that go on the back of the Little League baseball fields. People are going to see your brand there, right? That's going to stick with them. They're going to see that community support and want to give that back. So I think it really does depend on who your market is as well there.
Yeah, I love that suggestion. I mean, we're talking about more local stuff. So thinking about the community is probably a great way to go. I think that was a great suggestion. And I'm so upset that someone took beef ads from the Facebook. That's crazy, but
yeah,
it is what it is, I guess.
Right.
I guess the using multiple social medias might be a way to go to, right? So if something like that happens in one, you have the others to cover for you.
Yeah, and that's another thing to think about from a cost perspective of, do you buy ad time on Facebook, or do you buy, is there a targeted time of the year when you want to pay to advertise on Facebook and things like that? And all of that's just going to have to go into your business model and plan of, is the payoff from this input coming into the output? And again, I think that's going to be, that'll vary from entity to entity. And I have a feeling Julia will have some good insight on some of the things that they do to market their product, which I think will be really neat to hear.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Dr. Cooper, very much. Really
thank you.
Appreciate your information. I hope that you're going to stay with us to the end of tonight.
I am, yep.
So we can go back to questions later if anyone has anything else. But also, her email was on the last slide. If something comes up later in the week, or you can email her, email me, or forward whatever you feel like, whatever question you have, we're here to help. So I'll be happy to forward that one. And she just put her email on the chat box, on the chat thing too. And I had shared earlier the links she had on her presentation. So, and also the one for the PDF document, which I looked at earlier today, and it's pretty good. So congratulations to you guys. Okay, so let's move ahead and continue with the second half of our night. We're gonna not change the topics tonight. Last night we did change a little bit. We were all talking about animal health, but it did change a little bit. Now we're gonna stay a little bit on the same track, and we're gonna have Julia Livingston sharing a little bit of her experience with beef direct marketing. So she'll be presenting Getting Started, my experience with direct marked beef. So Julia graduated from Washington State University with a bachelor's degree in agricultural food system in 2020. Following graduation, she completed an internship here at URC. She worked with me, so that's how we met. And I have to say here on a side note, we really miss you here, Julia. You were an amazing person, amazing intern, helped a lot us during pandemic. So it was great. And so since she left, she's been working on her family ranch in Long Creek, Oregon. She's a 5th generation ranch from both sides of her family. And I think that's amazing because they know a lot, right? And in December 2021, she had her first set of butcher steers USDA certified process. She registered J3L Meat LCC in January 2022, and by May of 2022, so this year, she was selling beef from her family's ranch at the local farmers market in Umatilla County here in Oregon. So Julia, thank you very much for accepting this invitation. I honestly think that when we one of the biggest challenges in life, it's usually when we're starting something. So I really appreciate that you accepted to share your experience and so early in your career. I'm sure you're doing great, and I know you're gonna be very successful in years to come. So glad you accept, and the screen's yours. Thank you.
Thanks, Juliana. Yeah, I'm very excited to be here. And pre-disclosure, I'm, again, like we just heard, I'm in my first year of operations, so I'm still learning with everyone else here. And so this is just kind of what I've done and how I started. So I'm gonna share my screen here. And so
there it goes, looking great. Thank you.
Perfect. So my business is J3L Meat. I picked that because when my brother, sister, and I bought our family ranch in 2019, we renamed to J3L Ranch, and that's because we're all J names and Livingston is our last name. So we're previously Livingston Ranch, as you can see there in our picture. And we have a cow-calf operation, so we've always just been on the raising calves and selling them commercially side of things. We're a spring calving program. We're also a natural program, which means we don't use any, or we don't sell any anything that's received antibiotics, and we don't use any form of hormones. And they get, basically what they get is minerals in the field. And so we're also an Angus Hereford mix kind of herd. I like to say when people ask me at farmers markets that we are about 3/4 Angus and 1/4 Hereford. We're kind of phasing out a little bit because you've got a premium for Angus and black-hided animals. And so that's been our goal recently, but we've still got a little bit of genetic diversity in there with our Herefords. How I started, and so this is, for better or worse, my process for how I got started in this. We always knew that we've got a medium, small sized ranch, and so that supports one family. And so I was looking for where I fit into that situation, because my brother does most of the operation on the ranch and I've always helped him, but I knew eventually I needed to find my own path, and this is kind of where I decided to go with it. And so we had some animals we were raising to have butchered, maybe sell off the hoof. And what I found doing that was that a lot of people don't have room in their freezer for a whole animal or a half animal, let alone beef in bulk. And it was really almost too expensive for a lot of people, especially getting into it post-COVID. Things are a little bit tighter for people. So the process I kind of took with it was reserve a butcher appointment, make sure you've got some place to store it once it does happen, feeding out my steers, making sure I'm clear on all the regulations in my state, my area, and registering my business with the state, getting prices set, setting up a point of sale program so that I have a way to track all of those sales, and so that I can run cards, because that's a big thing for people. A lot of people don't operate on cash anymore. And so being able to accept card purchases makes a big difference at farmers markets. Getting promotional materials put out. So that's going to be your Facebook, Instagram. And on top of that, what you set up at your booth at farmers markets to kind of display your brand. And then farmers markets was my main point of sale for marketing. Really gets your face out there. A lot of people that go to farmers markets are very dedicated to going there, so they're looking to you. And the last thing I'm currently working on, and I'm still trying to figure out, is getting a website set up, because after farmers markets are over, people need a place to find you and a place to connect. And so that's what I'm working on now. So back to getting a butcher appointment and cold storage. Both of these need to be, like, for me, needed to be a convenient location, because when I butchered my first set a year ago, which is almost exactly a year ago tomorrow, the butcher that I found was able to get into was on the west side of Oregon. I'm in Eastern Oregon, and that's a 4.5, 5-hour drive. I was lucky because it was in December, so the temperature was really low, and I was able to transport that back to my cold storage location in Stanfield relatively easily. But when my regular butcher appointment is in September, that's something that becomes a little bit more iffy, because you've got 75 to 90 degree weather in September, depending on how the year's going, and that becomes a little bit of a problem. For cold storage, you need something that's very reliable. I know a lot of people probably pick someplace at their home, a bunch of chest freezers. I have a place near me that is a custom butcher that sells cold storage space. They have their own insurance covering everything in that space. And so to me, they're really reliable. That's a relationship I've really enjoyed building, and it helps me keep track of where everything is. And, you know, power goes out in residential areas all the time. And if that goes out when you've got your meat there and your whole stock, that can be a really big hit to you. So I'm really happy that I got to choose that. When picking a butcher, you really need to make sure you get on their list. I'd say 6 to 10 months early. Like Juliana said earlier in this, Oregon has a very limited option for USDA certified butchers. I'm fairly certain we don't have a state certified program, so it has to be USDA certified. And so getting on that list early when you know you'll have space, and then kind of adjusting your program so that your animals will be ready to go, convenient to when you can get an appointment, is going to be top of that, because if not, you're going to be kind of stuck with some more limited options. Some things to research when you're looking into your butcher is what kind of cuts they do. Like she said earlier, or what Jade said earlier, about more complicated cuts require more skilled butcher. Depending on what butcher you get, they're going to be willing or not willing to do some of those cuts. And some of my more popular cuts this year was a flat iron steak. I ran out very early at farmers markets, and I wanted to provide that for my next set of animals that I butchered this last September. And the butcher I had chosen was not willing to compromise with me on that. They weren't able to provide that cut. And so that's just something I'm going to have to tell my customers that I'll no longer have available until my next processing appointment. Something else is important to me is to make sure that the butcher I choose has good practices and good customer reviews, so that they kind of follow my same wants or needs for what I'm marketing for my animals. Something that we highlight is that we have gentle handling, and we really care about how our animals are feeling in the field and make sure that they're treated well and humanely. And if you go to a butcher that doesn't exactly follow those same practices, or that's not as important to them, then it's going to be a little bit of misleading marketing when you're telling your farmers market customers that that's something you value, and then they see something online about the butchery that you used. Getting in trouble for that, it can be a problem. It's a little bit misleading. Depending on what butcher you go to, it's going to be a little bit more or less expensive. My first butcher was almost $1,000 more expensive than my second butcher, but they were able to provide some of those more specialty cuts, where my second butcher wasn't able to provide one of those more specialty cuts, but they were a little bit harder to deal with relationship and customer service wise, where my first one was really helpful for being my first butcher. He was really communicative and kept me in the loop on things. And so you just kind of have to determine what your values are and if that can work together. Like I said, availability is very important, making sure you get that appointment booked early. And then proximity. A lot of the two butchers I've used in the past have been 4.5, 5 hour drives away. And so when you're driving back to your cold storage with frozen meat, you kind of need to make sure that you can keep that meat frozen on that drive, specifically when it's September and the temperature is relatively high. So the next thing I worked on was feeding out steers. Some things you need to take into account are the cost of your inputs. I raise basically what I say to my customers, which is true, is that I consider myself a non-feedlot option for direct market. There's other ones that do grain fed, and there's other ones that do dry aged beef. I'm basically your regular true beef without the feedlots. So they get to free graze on top of having a more traditional feed out diet. Now, a couple of my average costs is spent about 6.5 tons on 4 animals, and then 6.25 tons on the second set of animals. Your grain costs are going to be one of your more expensive attributes if you're feeding grain, because that's trying to get that a little bit higher so you can get a good rate of gain. Your hay costs are a little bit less expensive depending on the market. The first year is only like $450, while the second year was $900 because of the drought that we had in Oregon earlier in the year prior, and so hay was a little bit more expensive. It's also something you need to think about before the time comes, because when you're needing hay in the middle of winter, it's going to be so much less accessible. You won't be able to find it, or I wasn't. And so that's something you kind of need to prepare for in the summer and fall, is how much hay am I going to need for this set of animals that I'm raising, so that you can have that prior to when the need actually arises. And if we don't do a full grass finished style of beef at the moment, but we do do a free grazed situation so that they can walk around and have lots of space to kind of eat all the time. And so pasture space is something important. We have a couple 4 to 5 acre fenced off pieces that they live on. We switch back and forth from and rotate in as we need. And so that's, oh yeah, we're a certified natural program. And so I follow that through with my, for my meat products, so that you have that kind of extra level of premium. And so the next thing you work on after you get everything fed and raised is looking into regulations. Now, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not an extension agent, I'm not an accountant. So I can't give many recommendations depending on where you're at. Say, create a good relationship with your accountant, create a good relationship with a lawyer so you have someone to call and ask questions about licensing and regulations in your area. Registering an LLC in Oregon is relatively easy. You just need to fill out the terms of registration, give them your information, and pick a date, and then they have that filed within like 2 weeks. And so that's what I've done with that so far. Price setting is something really important because depending on what you price it, you can price out certain markets. I knew that I was going to be attending farmers markets. Generally, people who attend farmers markets are willing to spend a little bit more on the products because they know that it comes directly from the farmers and that they want a higher quality product from their area, and they expect to pay a little bit more from that. And that's kind of what my customer demographic is, focusing on farmers markets. The way I set my prices, I do some market research. I go on my local Safeway website, go on my local Rosars, and calculate what the average prices of each of my cuts would be at those locations. I also went to the Bureau of Labor Management website and looked up what the average cost nationwide for those products would be. And then I add my premium to the top of that so that I can account for breaking even and paying myself and paying for all these other input costs. And so make sure you know what your break-even price is so that you know kind of where you stand with certain additional costs that kind of arise, because that is something that will happen. You can't think of everything at the very beginning. You're gonna go through the process and find out, oh, I spent a little bit more on marketing materials than I thought, or you decide that, oh, I think I probably need a website. And now you've got a monthly bill for a website that you didn't account for. And so you kind of want to make sure that you have space for those new things in there. And then inventory, it's kind of a short bullet point on this, but is a major thing, and it's going to vary depending on who you are and almost your personality type. I have a very detailed inventory. I've got probably 1,000 pounds of product. I know how much each one of my products weighs. I know what storage locker each one of those are in, and I know how many of each product I have. And I base all my prices off of kind of that right there. So I know what's the least amount I can charge for this product and still make it back. So depending on how fast and loose you can play with that, inventory is really important to keep track of. Something you're going to use a lot and you need to make sure you really like is your point of sale program. I use my point of sale program for every single farmer's market the whole time long. And so there's lots of options for this. I use Square point of sale. There's Shopify, Clover, If you just kind of look those up and see which ones you like the best and which ones you kind of understand, then you can pick the best for your operation. Square point of sale is the one that I was most familiar with. I'd used it before when working on other projects and I really liked it. But something to keep in mind when you're picking a point of sale program is to think about if you're going to have a website and maybe what website platform you might use if you do that, because not all point of sale programs will interface with your website platforms like you would want them to. Fun fact, Square point of sale and Squarespace, the website platform, are two completely separate companies and they do not interface with each other. So something to keep in mind when you're picking that program. Also, your point of sale program is something that will help you track your sales throughout the year, what products sell the best for you. So it helps you with a lot of data and statistics within your operation. And it helps you keep track of your inventory. So if you have your own inventory of each of your products, and then you have your point of sale program inventory, kind of helps you keep everything on track. The next thing to think about is promotional materials, kind of different styles of that. I have Facebook and Instagram for my business. That's kind of what I started with. They're free, they're easy. Most of us know already how to use those. And Facebook has, which they will very much advertise to you. If you have a business, you can pay for them to advertise for your business for you. It's like $5 a month if you choose to do that. And then there's some print promotional materials that you want to keep in mind. Most farmers markets require you to have a clear list of products and the price for each of those. So that's something you're going to want to have solid and big letters so everyone can see, because you get a wide range of ages and audiences that attend farmers markets. You want to share a little bit about your business. Again, what kind of sets you apart, what makes you different, because there's going to be, depending on how big or small that farmer's market is, there's going to be a couple different direct marketers of beef and other proteins at that market. And so you want something that kind of gives them a little bit of information about you, because a lot of people will read all your information and then they'll ask you questions. And again, you want to make sure your branding is pretty consistent. So they can recognize you and they know where to come back to and what to look up online when they go home after talking to you. Something you will guaranteed have surplus of is ground beef. You want to figure out from the start how you can market ground beef, because that's something that I've relatively struggled with. It was kind of a learning curve for me. I thought I mostly buy ground beef when I'm buying beef because it's one of the cheaper options and it's one of the most diverse options when you're cooking. And so in my head, ground beef was going to sell really well because it's what I use, but not everyone cooks like you do. A lot of people, when they go to farmers markets, are looking for your higher end cuts. And so, and on top of that, you just have so much ground beef with every butcher appointment that it's going to be difficult to keep up with. So you want to make sure you have some discounts set up. I've discounted my ground beef once already, and I'm working on putting together some packages to sell ground beef a little bit better. This right here is my Instagram page at the moment. I'm working on selling some roasts for the holiday season. This is the flyer I created. It's got all my prices there from the start. It's got a little blurb about the ranch and about J3L, the business. And then this is the inside of that. That's got a little bit about me, how to place an order with me. And then I also put an average weight of products on there so that people can look at that and kind of get an idea about what they're getting, because I always want to see information for myself. And when you have so many different products like I do, everything is individually packaged. I rarely sell off the hoof or in bulk. And so giving people a good idea of what you have and what they're going to get, so there's a little bit more transparency with that, is always a good thing. Farmers markets. So this was a bit of a learning curve for me. This is a picture of me at my first farmers market. Something you'll find when you go to farmers markets is that there is a cost to participate. It's usually not just a one-time fee. My farmers market in Pendleton, it's $30 a week to attend. And so there's kind of that push to make sure I'm selling enough each week to justify paying to attend the farmers market. So and then on top of that, there's costs to travel there, and then making sure your mate stays a proper temperature during that, because farmers markets happen in the summer. And so you want to make sure your meat's staying cold, everything is in prime condition all the way until they get home. I use dry ice to keep my meat cold in a cooler. If you use dry ice, make sure to have a good barrier between your dry ice and your meat, because the dry ice will, freezer burn your meat. And so you kind of want to keep that in mind. Dry ice for me was usually about $11 a week, or a time I bought it, I'd buy 5 pounds depending on how hot it was that day. And so that's going to be a daily or weekly cost depending on how often you're attending farmers markets. Your most popular cuts at farmers markets are always going to be steaks and fat cuts. Like I said, flat iron steaks are really popular, flank steaks are really popular. And so you are going to sell out of those things quickly depending on how often you attend these markets and how quickly you sell through. Figuring out a way to market roasts and seeing if there's a way that they can either alter those themselves or teach them how to cook those things, or showing them different options with those cuts to get them to buy them and kind of see the wider realm of possibilities is something that helps a lot. A lot of questions they ask. You have to remember that people that aren't in your industry, as long as you're in the industry, you're going to have a lot more technical knowledge about it. And so I've been asked a couple times that in a nicer way to relatively dumb down my information in a way that I thought I was already kind of giving it the kind of lower common denominator explanation. Don't be afraid to over explain, because they're talking to you because they want to learn more from you. And so that was something I relatively struggled with. They're going to ask you a lot about your operation, about your feeding program, about how you handle animals. They're going to ask you where you're from. And so just being prepared to answer a lot of questions in a way that they can understand, in a way that they'll consume well, is really important. And then most farmers markets require you to have a base level insurance. So getting your insurance set up and having a relationship with your insurance person is something that will be really important, especially as you kind of scale up your operation and moving into websites and selling to restaurants and things like that. And we're down to the website. And so, like I said earlier, this is something that I'm just moving into. There's, again, lots of options for the platform to build a website. There's some that make it really easy to drag and drop everything and create it yourself. make sure when you're choosing a website platform that it's compatible with your point of sale program. And something that else to keep in mind is that some platforms are better suited to retail than others. Like I chose Wix for my website platform, or because it interfaces with Square point of sale the best, but it's not exactly the best suited to retail. And so that's kind of something to keep in mind. Also, when you're doing these things, make sure to not be afraid to reach out and have someone help you, because I'm not a super techie person. I'm having someone help me build this website. She's doing all the designing and kind of coordinating to make it look nice and pretty and presentable. And so along with that, again, you want to make sure you have proper insurance to kind of make sure you're covered in case anything does happen with that website. You want to make sure you have a terms of use so that you're covered in that area. Something I've been struggling with the website is figuring out shipping specifics. And so how much something will cost to ship to Montana or to ship further away, and how much that weighs, and kind of trying to figure out how to make the website calculate that for me, or if that's just some research I need to input. And then trying to get the website to do what I want it to do, because a lot of these websites are set up to sell like t-shirts and shoes and like specific items that kind of always weigh the same, and where we usually sell meat based on weight. I'm trying to figure out how to make that work the best for my situation. But again, I'm kind of still working on the details of figuring this out here. So that is my setup and kind of how my last year is gone. So if you do have any questions, now's the time.
Thank you, Julia. That was awesome. I really appreciate that you took the time to share a little bit with us of how you started, where you're doing, what you're doing. I'm actually really impressed, because I think it's so much work and there's so much planning. So I'm happy to see where you are and what you're doing, that you're sharing with us, because it's not easy to start. It's not easy to start anything, but that seems to me like a huge step, but it feels like you're very comfortable doing what you're doing. So congratulations, I guess.
Thank you.
I guess so, for sure. We do have quite a bit of questions on the Q&A box. So if you don't mind if you can go there and look at those, read those out loud and then answer. I think it's just easier than if I read it to you. Do you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. So this first one says, how far is the USDA plant from you? How has your experience been with the quality of job they do vacuum sealing the meat? So my USDA plants that I've been able to get into, again, the first couple times were a little bit of a rush, was at least 4.5 hours, because a lot of those plants are kind of centered around Portland and West Side area, if you know the geography of Oregon at all. And so that's quite a ways for me. And then they have done a very good job with vacuum packaging the meat. I haven't had any problems with that. The problems I have had with vacuum sealing meat is when I'm transporting it and unpacking it into like my cold storage areas. That vacuum sealing is very delicate. So you want to make sure you're very gentle when you're moving that stuff around, kind of doing as little moving it around as possible. Because once it's broken, that's not really something you especially want to sell, because then you've got opportunities for contaminants in there. The next question is, butchers are hard to come by in Montana. Is there a trend in other states in seeing government helping butchers to expand their businesses? Also, are ranchers in other states looking at beginning butcher shops? I don't know a whole lot about the Montana area. I know that there's a few places that are working to open butcher shops in Eastern Oregon. I'm hoping those work out well, because I'd really love to work with them.
Yeah, and I think if Jade wants to comment on that one, maybe.
Yes, I would very much appreciate that.
Yes. So Rose, they are, and like I said, there's really been a big push in the last couple of years for establishment of more small to medium sized processors, and that's nationwide. And so we're seeing a lot of those starting to pop up, and there are a lot of the people that are trying to get involved into those are cattle producers themselves. And I think a lot of the driving factor of that is that they simply are the ones that have to deal with them not being available, right? And so they're, kind of making the decision of, well, I'm just going to kind of get involved and kind of headway getting one in. So I do think in the next year and a half, you're going to see more of those pop up in areas that they haven't been as readily available in the past. So I would be on the lookout for those for sure.
Our next question says, I wonder if I started my business today, how long would it take to be profitable? I am in my first year. I'm not quite profitable yet. From what I hear from other people that have started businesses, and this isn't specifically direct market, but the general rule of thumb for businesses of what I've been told is it takes like 5 years to become profitable. So a little bit is just putting in the time and making sure you have a good plan and kind of setting goals and trying to reach them. And once I do, I will let you know. But I'm well backed so far. I have good support, so I'm hoping I'm on that track. The next question is, we know that gender inequality still exists in the agriculture sector. Have you ever felt discriminated or people refuse to buy your product for being a woman in the business? If they haven't told me about it. It's something, people are traditional and those people are out there, but a lot of my brother and I and my sister, we're all in our 20s still, and we are lucky to have a lot of good friends that are willing to help us work on this. And I think one of the pros about me being kind of a young woman at the farmer's market and selling meat is that maybe a different demographic will be more willing to approach me and ask questions about my product. Like 2 of the people that I regularly deliver ground beef to are both young women that were wanting to walk up and talk to me. And so you can look at things as kind of something that holds you back, or you can look at them as, well, maybe it's letting me be involved in this other demographic. And I think it's been a plus for me so far. The next question is, I'm struggling to find cold storage. Any suggestions or out of the box ideas? So one thing, if you're struggling to find cold storage is, you can always invest in some solid chest freezers. I really like chest freezers because they are good at keeping the cold in, and even if the power goes out, that's gonna stay sealed pretty well. I'd call around and ask some of your custom butchers. The place that I keep my cold storage is a custom butcher that has cold storage space. And so I'd call around and ask some of those people if they know of any suggestions. Any of these people who are in the processing side of everything, they have their own connections within their section, and they're really good resources to finding solutions to some of these problems, because it's something they have to deal with in keeping their product cold until people pick it up.
Yeah, and I would ask Jade also to comment on that one if she has any other suggestions for maybe a more temporary type of storage. I don't know if you have any.
Yeah, I would echo what Julia said. I think in some of that, it's calling your resources and trying to see for those. But yeah, I think, truss freezers are great. Things of that nature. It may be a temporary solution, but with some of that, it's going to be utilizing resources out there to source some of that stuff for sure, because and especially if you can find things that are industrial built, you know that they're going to be able to keep you at requirements and things of that nature too, temperature wise. So I agree wholeheartedly.
Our next question is, do you calculate a percentage loss for the seals that break? This is one of those things when I was just starting that I didn't particularly think about, but there was enough room in my markup that I can take that out of that. And in my next processing set, I did include that. You're always going to have a certain amount of loss because seals are going to break. Maybe you keep a certain amount of your product closer to you so that it's more accessible, and that freezer goes out for an afternoon. You kind of need to make sure you keep that in your numbers, and it's something I'm going to include from now on because it's definitely, you need some wiggle room for that kind of unforeseen circumstances to happen. And that was definitely a learning curve for me. Our next question, is there any work being done to incentivize the butcher profession? I'm in Oregon, and it seems like all of our local butchers aren't interested in getting into the state meat inspection program or USDA because there isn't anybody that is willing to work. It is a lot of time and money to train a guy from ground zero, and when he won't show up for work, it doesn't pay off. The labor issue is a huge barrier at this time, it seems. That's something I've heard as well. I just took a meats science class at Blue Mountain Community College here in Pendleton, and they've got programs to train people. It's more kind of getting people interested in working in that sector, it seems. I think they're trying to incentivize that because they know they want those facilities open, but maybe this is something that Jade can touch on.
Yep. So in some of the federal funding that's been made available for small to medium processors, some of the funds are for training of employees and things of that nature. The labor issue is, as we all know that are involved in beef production and beef processing, the labor issue is one of our biggest challenges, right? I mean, even at commercial processing, they're still not at 100% processing capacity simply because they can't get back to it. So the current administration, I think, has done a very good job of trying to incentivize some of these things or provide incentives for butchers, especially at the small to medium-sized processor level. But yeah, those funds are available. But again, it's also kind of finding people that can even do that training, right? I see a comment in the questions that says, butchering is seeming like a fading art. It can be, and it's one of those things that you may have some that are not willing to learn new cuts, like Julia talked about with flat irons and things like that. Those value-added cuts aren't they're still kind of novel. And so it's finding a balance there, and then, finding people that want to work, and then finding the resources for them that can make doing that available. But there are funds available for that. There are programs that are available for that. If you choose to seek those out and need those, they're available. And like I said, those are one of those things that extension or things like that can also kind of help you with navigating those.
And then the last question looks like says, can you review resources for state licensing to sell beef products in Oregon once again? The reference page I showed you was an Oregon State extension website. And that was, if you search direct market in Oregon, it's almost one of the first things that pops up in Google. And something I will say when doing research on licensing and kind of laws about this, again, I'm not a lawyer. I don't have a lot of experience in reading this stuff, but to look at some of the extension resources and then to kind of maybe hire a lawyer for an hour or something so they can look over some of these things with you, because a lot of the things that I read were specified to processors or specified to these kind of different sectors. It's not quite direct marketing, which part of me thinks maybe they haven't quite caught up to this kind of new thing that we're doing here. And so getting someone involved that is a real professional in that would probably be very beneficial. Unless anyone else has anything to add to that question.
No, I think that's a good advice. I mean, there's a lot of research we can do on our own, but sometimes it gets a little bit complicated. And like I said, hiring a lawyer for hours, few hours, it may be very useful. So I think that's a good advice. There were some comments in the chat box. I really appreciate those. Thank you, guys. Do you have anything to add, Jade, on the last question?
I was just going to say, some state extension services do have a lawyer that is available through extension. Like I said, in my post, Tiffany Lashmit is ours in Texas. And so that's also something to look at in your respect. Not all of them have them. But if not, I would suggest looking at your surrounding areas extension programs and see if they have one that's available. And you can also reach out to Tiffany because she's wonderful if all else fails and can try to at least connect you with one. Because if that's available, that's a good resource to have. And even if, they're not going to be your lawyer per se, but if they can connect you or answer some general questions or connect you with somebody that does specialize in that. So that's also, I think sometimes we don't do a really good job in extension of promoting some of our law professionals when we have them. So that's something that I would suggest looking into too on things like that.
Yeah, that's a good advice. And honestly, I don't know if we have someone in this capacity here in Oregon. I'll do a little bit of research, and if I find someone, I'll share with you guys.
Yeah, send it my way.
I have one more question, and it's like my question. What was the major challenge for you when you started, like on the first year? What was the thing that you like, I hate this, I'm gonna give up, I don't want to do it anymore? If you don't mind sharing again.
It was definitely finding a butcher that I wanted to work with and that kind of fits my needs. I'm still kind of on that journey right now of trying out different butchers that will kind of work with that, because like I said, the last one I went to wasn't really willing to do all the cuts that I really wanted, and the first one I went to wasn't very organized. And so, like, I will share this with you guys here, is that I had 3 animals that were full natural program, never had antibiotics, and I had 1 animal that did have antibiotics. And he didn't per se keep those separate, so I wasn't able to sell underneath my natural labeling kind of marketing because he didn't keep that 1 animal separate from the other ones.
So you could not identify.
Yeah, and so that was a big bummer. That one made me want to really whatever. But it's really
over it.
Fine. I'm over it. It's about finding one that you can work with kind of in a relationship style. Like the last one was very hard to work with on their customer service side. They were very quick. Most of these butchers are very, very busy at this moment in time. And finding one that's willing to kind of talk to you and understand that this is a really important step in your business and that you're going to have a lot of questions. You're going to really want to be really involved. Like at least I do. And having one that can understand that's really important, because these last 2 butchers I went to weren't willing to give me a tour. They weren't willing to spend a day with me and talk about their operation. And that was kind of a bummer and made me feel like, what's going on here? And so it's probably mostly because they're so very busy.
Yeah.
That's kind of a factor that is really important to me. I want to see how you operate, and I want to see if what you're marketing is what you're doing. So. Yeah.
No, I thank you. I really appreciate your answering all those questions. I think we got quite a bit of questions. And I think from you talking and Jade talking today, I think for me, direct marketing is a lot of planning and relationship building at the end of the day, right? Like it's not simple, but it must be very rewarding whenever you finish your first set of animals or something like that. So
absolutely,
you guys are on a great path. So I think we don't have any more questions. At least we don't have on the Q&A box. I don't have anything here with me. I got questions even on my phone today. So I would like to move forward with our prize drawing. Yay! So, and also like on the questions, I think if you folks have any questions later, feel free to email me, email Jade, Julia. If you email me, I'll make sure to forward those questions to them if I cannot help. So I think I'm the easy point of access, so feel free to reach out. But I think they know that they can do that. So let's just move forward to this prize drawing. We do have 44 people connected right now. So Jade, if you can give me a number from 0 to 4. Yes.
2.
2. Perfect. Julia, from 0 to 9.
7.
7. So 27, and I can find here on my list. Let's see. Oops. Sometimes it's difficult to make this thing go where I want to go. To go. So Melissa Ward, if you can send me your email on the chat, that will be awesome. I can also send it to you here, a message. Let me find you. I lost you again. There we go. There we go. So hard to type and talk. Okay, there we go. Just send her a text. So Melissa Ward is the winner for tonight. I think with that, we are done for tonight. I hope you guys have enjoyed as much as I did. I learned a lot. I'm very, very thankful to you two for connecting with us tonight. It was great. I really have a feeling that direct marketing is here to stay, and there's a lot that can be done still, a lot of research that needs to be done, right? Feels like you guys, Julie especially, kind of on your own at some point. So I think us as Extension have a lot of work to do too, to make more information available. So hopefully we can have this talk in 5 years from now or 10 years from now. Everything will be perfect. But I think that's it. Thank you very much, girls. I really appreciate, and I hope you guys connect with us tomorrow night for Dr. Alice Brandel and Dr. Kelsey Harvey for last night of RancHER. Tomorrow we're gonna be focused on nutrition of those animals. So I think it's gonna be a great night. So thank you very much, everybody, and have a good night.